And I mean, for me alone, growing up, after my experience with sexual abuse, I used drugs. I went through a very um I went down a downhill battle. Absolutely. Very depressed as I got older. And it's because of that experience that I want to be here to share my story for others, to give a voice to others so that others know that they're not alone.
Welcome back to Resilient Moms. We are so excited to have you joining us today. My name is Brittany, and with me as always, my best friend Karah. And today we are actually going to talk about Karah, and she's going to share her story with us. So, Karah, what was the turning point for you when you decided that staying silent was no longer an option?
Yeah, thank you so much, Brittany, for asking that question. So over the last 10 years or so, and more importantly, within the last year, there came that moment in my life when I sat back and I realized that being silent was no longer an option for me. I really sat back one day and went, am I just going to sit here and lick my wounds and heal and move on from my negative experiences? Or do I want to heal properly and then also rise up and speak out for others who have not found their voice yet? I obviously, here I am today, decided I couldn't be silent, and not only for myself, but for others. So many of you out there might be listening who have gone through similar experiences to myself and Brittany, and you might be living with regret or shame. You could be living with depression. You could be putting a mask on every single day and sad inside, but showing others this happy face that you might have. To you, I say that I am here for you. I am here to be your voice until you can gain your strength to speak up for yourself. And together, we will uncover the confidence buried within.
Yeah, that is so beautiful that you are showing up for yourself, which then allows you to show up for others who may not have a support system. And it's just incredibly powerful. How did speaking out help you reclaim your power?
Yeah, absolutely. And before I jump into that, I would love to say that I do have a massive support system, one with you. You have been with me every step of the way, husband, my family. So it is really, really good to have a great support system behind you. To provide you that safety net when you don't always feel safe in your own body, and they can really be there to remind you why you're doing certain things and help you pause if you think you're moving too fast. But I realized for myself that by staying silent, I was allowing my abuser to hold power over me.
Wow.
Speaking out is my way of reclaiming that power. And it might not be that way for others. But for me, I want to use my power to help others who feel powerless. It was about turning my pain into a purpose.
That one gave me chills. Like you taking your power back. So profound. Why do you think that the topic of sexual abuse is so difficult for people to discuss openly?
Oh, I have the perfect analogy for you, especially when it comes to sexual abuse. And it doesn't matter if sexual abuse in your mind was violent or not, right? Like we've talked about in the past, all abuse or all experiences are definitely validated. That's what we're here to do. But sexual abuse itself it's suffocating when you think about it. Nobody talks about sexual abuse openly. Think about standing outside, 90-degree weather, you're covered in glue, and you have feathers all over you. Like it is just absolutely suffocating. It makes you want to go, ugh, right? Like when people talk about their experience, you're like, wait, pause. I don't want to hear that, because the other person who's listening becomes very uncomfortable. And it's something that people want to shy away from a lot. But the topic of sexual abuse is definitely something that we have to face head on. Brittany, did you know that every 9 minutes, I'm going to say that again, every 9 minutes, Child Protective Services finds evidence for a claim of sexual abuse?
I
Did
had
you know that?
no idea.
Yes.
9
Yeah.
minutes?
9 minutes.
Ugh.
back in 2016, Child Protective Services substantiated or found strong evidence to indicate that 57,329 children were victims of sexual abuse. It's horrific. And we're sitting here staying silent.
Mm-hmm.
People aren't talking about it.
And nothing changes with silence.
Exactly.
I mean, those statistics that you mentioned are staggering. How does this kind of trauma impact survivors later in life?
Before I dive into that, just some more statistics I have is 1 in 9 girls and 1 in 20 boys under the age of 18 experience sexual abuse or assault in their lifetime. Thinking about those statistics is heartbreaking.
One
right?
in 9?
I am 1 in 9 girls, right? 1 in 20 boys, right? It can happen to anyone. And that's what's so upsetting. And the effects are so long lasting. Victims are generally 4 times likely to develop drug abuse, 4 times to experience PTSD as adults, 3 times more likely to experience a major depressive episode. And I mean, for me alone, growing up, after my experience with sexual abuse, I used drugs. You know, I went through a very, I went down a downhill battle. Absolutely. Very depressed as I got older. And it's because of that experience that I want to be here to share my story for others, to give a voice to others so that others know that they're not alone.
Absolutely. And I think what blows my mind about those numbers is, like, still as an educator with 30 kids in my classroom, looking at those children, 2 to 3 of them could very well have been abused before they got to me. And so I think, like, we're really thinking about this as how do we come together as a whole community, right? Harder for teachers, but parents are the first stopping ground for this. So what should parents be aware of when it comes to preventing child sexual abuse?
Yeah. So there's a lot. I mean, for parents, you have to know the statistics. You can't sit back and say, "Oh, that could never happen to my child. My child would never be abused. I would never allow them to be in a situation where that would happen." But the crazy thing is that 93% of child sexual abuse cases, the victim knows the person who's doing it. Oftentimes it's family members or close acquaintances. Those actual statistics are 34% of the abusers are family members, and only 7% are strangers. And so when you think about that, you have to be so careful of who you allow your children to spend time with. Even though, you could say, "Oh, well, it's my uncle who I've known forever. I know they would never do anything," but they could.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's my aunt, or it's my sister, or it's my brother. You never know. It could be, their sibling. It could be a grandparent. It could be the parent who is abusing.
Mm-hmm.
That happens, and it happens more than we think. It could be a step parent. It could be, the mom's boyfriend. This is happening, and it's happening way more than you think it is. So, keep your eyes open. Take a pause when you're like, "Oh yeah, maybe this person wants to spend the night with so-and-so." And there's only so much we can do. Yeah, I don't want to put parents in a state of panic. That's the last thing we want. I'll tell you that even from my own experience, I never really stayed the night anywhere. So it's not like, for me, in my experience, it's because my mom let me stay wherever I wanted, right? Oftentimes it happened at home. So for parents, you have to just be aware and watch the behaviors of your children. If all of a sudden they're changing their behaviors, you should start taking notice and create a safe environment for them to share with you their experience. If you get angry, or if you don't believe them, or any number of something that's opposite of just listening and providing a safe environment for your children to speak to you, they will not do it. There are many people, many victims who are often asked if they've been abused, and they will say no, because they're afraid. They have their own shame, right? Maybe they think it's their fault. And that's so heartbreaking.
Right. Yeah, that safety and listening is key. You had mentioned not wanting to cause a panic, right? And that is certainly not our goal, but knowledge is power. And just because we don't know the statistics doesn't make them less real, right? And so once we have that information, we can then be aware and do something about it. And so with that, you have probably needed to stay very hopeful during your entire life. And so how did you manage to maintain hope during the challenging times in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. I was abused for 10 years. Uh, Truly, even as a little girl, I absolutely refused to let my abuser extinguish this light that I had inside. I was always happy, outgoing. Um, but even though I was truly happy and outgoing, I was still screaming inside. I was a little girl who was abused, who didn't know what was going on. And I was unable to find my voice at the time or feel safe to use it. Right. I mean, for me, I don't think my behaviors changed. And that's the scary part too, as parents, because I don't think my parents ever really took notice that anything was different, because I still stayed consistent and happy through my adolescence. But I never felt safe to speak up. My experiences could have easily continued to lead me down a really dark path. I did use substance abuse, but I was able to get out of it because I knew that that's not what I wanted for myself. One thing, though, that I did want to circle back to is the types of behaviors that could come out from sexual abuse. And that could be, maybe your child is potty trained, but then all of a sudden they start wetting the bed.
So
And
regression.
there's no yes, they start to regress. Anger. Maybe they're closed down. Maybe the opposite of me. Maybe they start to, turn inward and they're not as outgoing or happy. One thing I do know is when I look back at photos of myself, even though I have memories of being happy, when I look back at photos of myself, I see a period of time before the abuse started. And you can see in your children's eyes, or I could see in my photograph, this light. And after, when I started looking at the years of when it had started, through my adolescence, through my teenage years, that light was gone.
Wow.
It was like darkness looking into my eyes when I was looking at myself as a little girl.
Wow. And now you are in a point of your life where going through healing brings all that back, right? Like you may
Yes,
have left it in the past for a while and maybe dissociated a little bit. And now,
absolutely.
the healing process, it's all coming up. So, how are you staying grounded and focused during this, second part of your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. And listeners, you may be sitting there saying, "Wow, she's telling her story. She's able to speak," but that doesn't mean that the feelings aren't still there inside, right? Communicating my abuse still makes me nervous and anxious, right? But I allow those feelings to happen because I've gotten to that point where I can use the tools and resources to my advantage to where I don't regress. And that's, I've got my safety of my family who really support me too. So that is so incredibly helpful, that if you as a listener want to start speaking about your abuse too, make sure you really work through your healing yourself, work through it with others, go to a therapist, go to a coach, talk through it with family, and make sure you feel safe inside your body before you start speaking up. Because I will tell you, a couple years ago, I wanted to take that step where I wanted to start speaking up, and I did. I ended up going back into a depressive state. Again, not to scare you, but I did. I went back into a depressive state, and I went back to therapy, and I started truly working through the steps to heal properly. And so now, I am here in this place. But when we go through healing, it's a back and forth. You can get 10 spaces ahead and maybe fall five spaces backward. It is a continuous back and forth. You will always continue to heal. And who knows? You want to know what? In 2 years, maybe all of a sudden my body will be like, wait, pause. You need to listen to yourself again. You need to work through something else now. To answer your question, I sit here and I truly believe that I need to turn my pain into a purpose. I've always known that I want to help others overcome their own battles with abuse and neglect. That mission in myself has kept me so grounded and focused, even in my darkest times. And I always, like I said, I've also had so much support from friends and family, and that really does make a big difference.
And it's beautiful that that mission that you've always held helped you turn inward. Because without that drive and motivation to want to help others, you may not have started the healing process for yourself, which is, kind of very similar to my story. Mine was my kids. I wanted to change the future of my kids. And once I started that path, it turned back to me. So no matter what journeys we're on, we always have to look inward. So what advice would you give to someone who is starting this journey and struggling to find their purpose after experiencing trauma?
Like I mentioned before, in my heart, I always knew that I had a calling to help others overcome their own battles with abuse and neglect. I knew for me that I needed to fulfill this mission. And in order to do that, I had to stay strong. I had to stay sober and be a living testament to the power of resilience. Each day for me is an opportunity to let go of anger, resentment, shame, and embrace healing. What happened to me is I didn't ask for that, right? It is not my shame that I've been holding all these years. It's actually my abuser's shame. And so it's time to let go. And as we begin to release these burdens, we make room for joy, peace, and strength.
Love that. Absolutely. If someone is just beginning on this healing journey, what is the first step that you would ask them to take?
Start small. Don't try and, us trauma survivors, we love to say, oh, okay, I've got this big picture. Let me jump right into that. No, don't do that. Start small. Acknowledge your feelings and experiences. That is the first step. And it's a big first step. Find a safe person to talk to, whether it's a friend, a family member, a therapist, and keep reminding yourself that your story does matter. You have a right to be heard by anyone, whether you want to do it on a big stage or in a one-on-one setting. You have the right to be heard. Healing is definitely a journey, and it's one that we can do together.
Absolutely. What a beautiful story. Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for your vulnerability. Your story will inspire many listeners. What can our audience expect from us next week?
Next time on Resilient Moms, next week, we get the opportunity to dive into Brittany's story and exploring the impact of generational trauma. It is definitely an episode you won't want to miss. Thank you, everyone.